podcast where truth moves faster than a Holstein calf. No waiting on some pretty page. We're charting your ground in the digital age. From genomic codes to row-wide facts, we cut through the noise, no holding back. Not your daddy's dairy news tonight. We're sparking debates with every insight. The ring's not where the real fight's at. It's in the data, in the channel chat. From pasture to processor to your morning cup, we're raising the stakes. Try and get ahead of herd. Yeah! Where the future's more than just a word. Ahead of herd. Come on. The Bullvine's calling, let your voice be heard.
Welcome back to the Bullvine podcast, where we cut through dairy industry noise to get you the insights that actually matter for your operation.
And today we're diving deep into a feature piece that's got some serious buzz. This one has layers that'll make every farmer rethink their approach to daily feed consistency and butterfat protection.
I love this topic. We are talking about potentially 6 figures of lost revenue that can be solved with a piece of molded plastic that costs, what, $200?
That's it. We are focusing on the humble Penn State Particle Separator, the PSPS.
It's the paradox of profit, really.
It is the ultimate irony, isn't it? I mean, I've been on dairies with multi-million-dollar investments, robotic milkers, thermal imaging, the best genetics money can buy.
It works.
Everything. And yet, the PSPS, the one tool that makes sure the whole feed delivery system actually works, is still sitting in its original cardboard box. Maybe, tucked behind the mineral supplements, untouched.
I remember that quote from the source material that just hammered this home, the herd manager who said, "We've been too busy to get into the routine."
Too busy.
Too busy to capture $60,000 of profit.
That phrase, too busy, that's where efficiency just collapses on so many farms. You get so busy dealing with the results of the problem. The acidosis, the lame cows, the tank test that makes you cringe.
Right, you're firefighting.
Constantly. You're firefighting instead of investing, 15 minutes a week to prevent the fire from starting in the first place.
And we have to be clear, this isn't about minor tweaks or a little bit of slippage. The stakes here are genuinely massive. The data shows inconsistent TMR is a 5 to 6 figure leak per year.
This isn't margin slippage, it's revenue destruction. When that particle size drifts, when the physical structure of the feed is off, you are routinely losing 3 to 8 pounds of milk per cow per day.
And the part that really hurts,
the butterfat. You're losing 0.3 to 0.6 percentage points of butterfat, losing half a point of fat when component premiums are driving your entire margin. That is an absolute disaster.
So you run the numbers on, say, a 600 cow herd with that kind of drift. We're talking about thousands and thousands of dollars every single month that are just evaporating.
Gone. It's money left on the table because 5 minutes of quality control felt like too much trouble.
And this is why we have to challenge the core assumption today. We have to challenge the idea that your nutritionist's paper ration, that beautiful, optimized spreadsheet.
The one that costs a fortune to develop.
That one. We have to challenge the idea that it actually matches what the cow eats. Because if the physical structure is wrong, that spreadsheet is, frankly, irrelevant.
Exactly. The core controversy is that this one tiny physical factor, the length and distribution of the feed particles, determines whether you get SARA or you get superior components.
It's the difference between buying expensive feed and using expensive feed.
The physical delivery system is what translates nutritional potential into component reality. We can optimize the chemistry all day long, but if the mechanical structure fails, all that high-priced chemistry is useless.
Okay, let's unpack this. We're jumping right into the deep dive on consistency as quality control, because this really requires a fundamental shift in how you think about feeding.
I think we have to start with that quote from Dr. Mike Hutchins. He said, "Feed uniformity is your daily quality control system. Without it, you're guessing."
That is the most honest and maybe the most brutal truth you can give a producer. It is the daily quality control. I mean, think about it. If you were running a food manufacturing plant, you wouldn't let the size of your ingredients fluctuate wildly from batch to batch, would you?
No way. The quality of your final product would plummet.
And on a dairy, the final product is milk components. The raw material delivery system is the TMR.
And what farmers need to get their heads around is that the chemical composition of the feed, that's relatively stable once it's in the silo, but the physical structure, that critical particle size, that's volatile.
Volatile is the perfect word. It changes based on the mixer speed, The wear on the augers, how dry the silage is, the mixing time.
Right.
It could be different load by load, day by day.
And in this market, every single lost component point is a self-inflicted financial wound. We're breeding for butterfat, we have to feed for it too.
So let's get into the biology, because this is where that $250,000 is hiding. It all centers around one thing, the rumen mat.
You really cannot overstate the importance of the rumen mat. The rumen is not some simple mixing bowl. It's a highly sophisticated, stratified ecosystem.
Right. And for it to work right, it needs long particles, we're talking about the stuff that's greater than 19 millimeters, to form a floating physical mat, like a raft, on top of all the liquid. This is just non-negotiable physiology.
And that mat does a few critical jobs. First, it controls retention time. It physically traps the smaller digestible particles, the grains, the fines, and holds them in the fermentation chamber so the microbes have time to work.
So if the TMR is too fine, there's no mat.
And all that expensive energy gets washed out before the cow can use it. It goes right out the back end.
The mat is also where the good microbes live, right? The fiber digesters.
It's their preferred habitat. They colonize those long, buoyant particles. If the mat fails, those critical microbial populations struggle. But the most important thing, the part that directly connects particle size to sera, is cud chewing.
The physical presence of that coarse material forces the cow to ruminate.
It stimulates rumination. It makes her chew her cud for hours.
And cud chewing is the cow's own internal organic buffer system.
It's the engine of her antacid response. We are talking about a massive amount of saliva, 50, maybe up to 90 liters per cow per day. And that saliva is packed with sodium bicarbonate and phosphate buffers.
So less chewing means less saliva. Less saliva means rumen pH drops. And if it drops below 5.8,
you're in sera territory. So when you use the PSPS to measure physically effective NDF, the PNDF, what you are literally measuring is the diet's power to trigger those 90 liters of essential buffering fluid. It's an early warning system.
And when that consistency fails, when the structure breaks down, you don't just have one herd anymore. You get these phantom herds inside the same pen.
Exactly. The dominant cows, the boss cows, they go through and sort for all the tasty high-starch grain. They just push the long fiber aside.
And they get these massive slugs of carbohydrates, which sends their rumen pH into a nosedive.
And you can't just assume the submissive cows are okay.
No, they get what's left. They get the orts.
They're left with a high-fiber, low-energy, unappetizing diet that the boss cows rejected. So they're not limited by their genetics anymore. They're limited by a lack of energy. They just chronically underperform.
So your beautiful spreadsheet that assumes every cow eats the exact same thing is completely broken. You've got sick, acidotic cows and, at the same time, skinny, underperforming cows. That variation is where all the profit just evaporates.
It's a management nightmare.
Okay, let's shift gears and get into the science inside the box. We need to detail these guidelines not just as numbers on a page, but as physiological needs. This is where you get the actionable data.
This is the Rosetta Stone of TMR. The shaker box breaks the ration into 4 distinct physical parts, and each one has a specific job in the rumen.
Let's start at the top, the biggest particles. This is the sorting risk zone.
The top sieve, everything greater than 19 millimeters. The target range here is really tight, 2 to 8%.
That's your structural scaffolding. That little bit, that 2 to 8%, is what guarantees cud chewing and mat formation. If you fall below 2%, you basically have zero defense against sera.
But, and this is a big but, if you go over 8%, especially if you're pushing 10 or 15, you're giving the cow too much choice. Those long, ropey bits of hay are just too easy for her to sort out.
That's the key, isn't it? It's not just enough fiber, it has to be fiber that can't be easily sorted.
Precisely. Next up is the largest fraction, the middle sieve, 8 to 19 millimeters. This is the workhorse. The target is 30 to 50%.
This is your sweet spot. It's long enough to be part of the rumen mat, but it's short enough that you can't easily push it aside. This is where your highly digestible fiber lives.
Then you've got the lower sieve, 4 to 8 millimeters. Target is 20 to 30%. This stuff sinks faster. It provides huge surface area for the microbes to attach to. It just makes fermentation more efficient.
And finally, we get to the danger zone, the pan. Anything under 4 millimeters. You have got to keep this under 20%.
If you are above 20% in the pan, you are basically loading the system with rocket fuel, rapidly fermentable grains, fines. It creates an explosion of acid that the cow's natural buffer system, which is relying on that little bit of long fiber, just cannot handle.
Okay, that leads us directly to the mechanism of milk fat depression. We've spent some time here because this is complex, it's not well understood, and it's where the real high-value insight is hiding.
I agree. Farmers know high grain means low fat, but they usually think it's just, a lack of building blocks for fat. It's not. It is a targeted biological assassination of the butterfat production process.
So you have a physical problem. Too much in the pan, not enough on top, which creates a chemical problem. Rumen pH drops below 5.8. How does that cause that specific severe drop in milk fat?
It's a microbial coup d'etat. When the rumen gets acidic, the good cellulitic bacteria, the ones we need, they get inhibited. They start to die off because they need a pH above 6.
And as they die off, something else moves in.
You get a population boom of acid-tolerant bacteria. And these guys start processing the unsaturated fatty acids in the diet, the fats from corn silage, soybeans, supplements.
This is the biohydrogenation pathway failure we hear about.
Exactly. Normally, the good microbes take those unsaturated fats and turn them into harmless saturated fat in a safe, multi-step process. But when these acid-loving bugs take over, they interrupt that process. They create these intermediate fatty acids.
And one of those intermediates is the killer.
It produces a specific isomer known as trans-10-cis-12 conjugated linoleic acid, or CLA, and this molecule isn't just waste. It's a highly potent biological signaling molecule.
How potent are we talking?
It is frighteningly potent. Research shows that if the cow produces just a few grams of this specific isomer a day, it travels through her bloodstream and acts like a biological kill switch on the mammary gland.
Wait, a kill switch? So it's not just slowing things down, it's actively stopping production.
It specifically targets the genes responsible for making the short and medium-chain fatty acids that make up the bulk of milk fat. It tells the udder to halt production.
So the cow has the energy, she has the building blocks, but this one molecule is literally telling her udder to shut down.
Correct. It doesn't just limit production, it actively shuts down the machinery. And the dose-response curve is steep. Even small, chronic TMR inconsistencies that create a constant state of SARA can depress your fat yield by 25 to 50%.
Wow.
The PSPS is measuring your risk of creating this component-destroying agent.
If that's not enough to make you shake that box once a week, I don't know what is. You're not just measuring particle size, you're measuring your defense against this kill switch molecule.
And we can't forget the other physical cost of low pH. The fat is the visible part. But that constant acid burn damages the lining of the rumen wall, it reduces nutrient absorption, and leads to the release of histamines and inflammatory compounds.
And inflammation is the direct highway to laminitis.
It is. That systemic inflammation is a huge contributor to foot problems, which leads to lameness, which reduces DMI, which increases culling. It's a vicious cycle. The loss of half a point of butterfat is the cost you see on the milk check. The lameness is the hidden cost of that same inconsistency.
So it's a full system failure, all started by a few percentage points of fine material in the TMR. Okay, now we have to close the loop. Particle size is what goes in, fecal starch is what comes out. Together, they're the full audit.
This is the economic accountability check. If you're using the shaker box but you ignore fecal starch, you're only seeing half the picture. The starch test tells you how much expensive feed you are literally flushing down the drain.
So what's the benchmark? We need hard numbers here.
The benchmark for fecal starch should be below 3%. That's optimal. If you're below 1%, you are running a gold standard operation.
And the warning signs.
3 to 5% is an alert. You're losing efficiency. But once you're consistently above 5%, that's a full-blown economic alarm. You're losing significant money because the feed is just moving too fast.
Let's nail down that cost. What's the financial hit of that inefficiency?
The research is really clear on this. For every 1% increase in fecal starch above that 3% threshold, you lose about 0.7 pounds of milk per cow per day.
Okay, let's run that 1,000-cow dairy scenario from the research, because the number is just staggering.
So let's say a herd goes from a goal of 1% starch loss up to a poor, but honestly very common 6%. That's a 5-point difference in waste.
5 points times 0.7 pounds of milk. That's 3.5 pounds of milk lost per cow every single day.
For a 1,000-cow herd, that's 3,500 pounds of milk lost daily. Annually, that is over 1.28 million pounds of milk that's just poured into the manure pit.
And if we use a conservative milk price, say $20 per hundredweight, that inefficiency is costing that farm $256,000 a year.
And that's the crucial point. That $250,000 loss is just the lost milk revenue.
Right.
It doesn't count the cost of the expensive corn you bought and paid to process only to flush it.
Oh.
It doesn't count the vet bills for the laminitis cases that the underlying acidosis caused. The real economic loss is probably 1.5 to 2 times that number.
The ROI on a $200 plastic box is astronomical.
It's instantaneous.
Okay, but I'm not just buying that it's correlation. How do we prove the shaker box fixed it? There are so many variables on a farm.
That's a great challenge. The PSPS is what lets you isolate the variable. If you test your feed and your pan fraction is, say, 28% way too high and your fecal starch is 6%, that is a direct link between physical structure and washout.
Okay.
So you make one change, you adjust the mixer time, and 3 weeks later, your fecal starch is down to 3% and your pan fraction is 18%. You have empirical proof that the physical structure was the bottleneck.
Mm-hmm.
The PSPS gives you the data to prove it.
It provides the accountability. Got it. Now let's get into practical troubleshooting. The fix is totally different if the TMR is too fine versus too long.
Absolutely. 2 distinct failures. Let's start with scenario A, the too fine leak. This is usually a mixer wagon problem.
And this happens a lot in winter, right? Forges are drier, operators run the mixer longer to break up frozen chunks, and they just pulverize the fiber.
And this is the deceptive part. The operator looks at the TMR and thinks it looks great, it's so uniform and fluffy. But in reality, the structural integrity, the PNDF, has been destroyed.
So the cow is eating this finely ground mash, the rumen mat collapses, the particles are dense, and they just get flushed out. Wash out.
The feed retention time plummets. Instead of 35 hours, maybe it's only 20. The microbes just don't get enough time to do their job.
And that's why you see high fecal starch. Not because the kernel processor failed, but because the structure failed and the feed moved through the cow too fast.
The fix is usually simple. Reduce mixing time. For a lot of vertical mixers, just cutting the final mix from 5 minutes to 3 can be revolutionary. And check your hardware. Are your kicker plates too aggressive?
Loading order is huge, too. You don't want to throw fragile hay in an empty mixer and just grind it to dust while you load everything else.
Put it in later. And another quick fix is moisture. A fine TMR will segregate in the bunk. Adding 5 to 10% more moisture water, molasses helps bind those fines to the bigger particles and stop sorting.
Okay, now the flip side. Scenario B, the too long trap. This is usually dull knives or, just fear.
It's driven by the fear of Sarah. Farmers think longer fiber is safer. But if it's too long, it's just an obstacle the cow sorts around.
The PSPS diagnostic is clear here. If your top sieve is consistently pushing 10-15%, your sorting risk is in the red zone.
And the way you prove it is you compare the fresh TMR to the refusals, the orts. If your fresh TMR is 6% on the top screen, but the orts the next morning are 25% on top, sorting is confirmed. The cow has physically selected against the structure you designed.
And for a fresh cow, that is a metabolic hand grenade.
It is absolutely devastating for the fresh group. They're already fragile. If they sort for a high-starch meal right after calving, you just fast-track acidosis, which drives down DMI, which leads straight to ketosis and DAs. It's a cascading failure.
Let's talk about the specific challenges the Penn State data uncovered. The bowlage challenge was a big one.
Huge. Bowlage, for all its benefits, can be a mixing nightmare. Herds feeding it were frequently testing at 20 to 40% on the top sieve.
So a third of the feed is way too long and super sortable. That's 4 to 5 times the limit.
The physical nature of the bale just resists breaking down in the mixer. You get these massive ropey clumps that the cow just refuses to eat.
So if you're using bowlage and your top sieve is high, the fix isn't just about mixing longer, is it?
No, in fact, that might make the fines worse. It often means you have to pre-chop the bales or you have to look back at your harvest protocol. The mixer can't fix bad forage processing. The PSPS just makes the problem visible.
And they also found a case that showed the opposite problem, the too fine leak.
Yep, the case where physically effective fiber dropped to 16%. The TMR was so fine that the washout was so fast you could see whole corn kernels in the manure. That's your $250,000 loss, right there in front of you.
The PSPS stops you from blaming the corn processor when the mixer is the real culprit.
It redirects your troubleshooting. If milk fat drops, shake the box. If you see sorting, add moisture to make the TMR sticky. If it's too fine, cut the mix time or add a bit of straw late in the load. The box turns your diagnosis into an action plan.
The whole goal here is to get away from reactive firefighting and build a culture of consistency. But when a farmer makes a change, they have to manage their expectations. The rumen doesn't heal overnight. We need to walk through the 21-day recovery timeline.
This is where so many producers fail. They fix the mix on a Tuesday, check the test on Thursday, see no change, and go right back to the old broken way by Friday. You have to respect the biology.
Okay, let's walk through the 3 weeks, step by step. What should you be tracking?
Days 1 to 2 is behavioral stabilization. If you fix the structure, sorting should stop almost immediately. Look at the refusals. Are they more uniform? And check your rumination monitors. You should see cud chewing time start to tick up.
Then comes the physiological relief.
Days 3 to 5, intake response. Dry matter intake should climb by 2 to 4 counts. The cow just feels better because her rumen pH is stable. She's happier to eat.
And production follows pretty quickly after that.
Days 5 to 7, you'll see a milk volume rise, a bump in the bulk tank of 3 to 5 pounds per cow. That's the direct result of higher intake and less wasted starch.
But the component change, the money shot, that takes longer because of that whole biohydrogenation pathway mess.
That's week 2. Days 10 to 14 is the butterfat lift. This is when the magic happens. That trans 10, cis 12 CLA is gone, the good microbes have repopulated, and the mammary gland finally turns the fat synthesis genes back on. You'll see your butterfat lift by 0.2 to 0.3 points.
And when do you finally declare victory?
Day 21, that's full stability. By then, the rumen lining has healed, the microbial ecosystem is stable, and metabolic inflammation is down. You have to commit to the change for 3 full weeks.
That 21-day window changes the PSPS from a crisis tool into a strategic tool, and that leads to operationalizing it, making it a habit.
It has to be cultural. I call it Feed Quality Friday, a 15-minute scheduled event. Test the fresh TMR, test the refusals, log the data, share it with the team.
And the numbers back up that tiny time investment.
Absolutely. The data shows farms that monitor regularly reduce their component volatility by nearly 30%. That means predictable milk checks.
And the financial impact of that stability.
It translates to saving $50,000 to $60,000 a year on a 500-cow herd, just from reducing those swings and improving efficiency. A 15-minute habit is generating the salary of a full-time employee.
But more than the money, it changes the culture. It builds accountability.
It shifts the mindset. When you post the PSPS target chart next to the mixer, the feeder stops guessing and starts operating with a clear, measurable goal. I need the pan at 18% and the top at 6%.
They become a feed chef instead of just a mixer operator. They start to own the quality of the final product.
And they start catching problems like dry silage before it ever shows up as a pH crash 2 weeks later. It moves management from reactive to proactive.
Which brings us right back to that quote from Dr. Hutchins. Technology gives you options, but discipline delivers results. The PSPS isn't fancy tech, it's a discipline tool.
It is the truth serum of efficient dairy farming.
All right, a producer is driving back from the feed mill. They've heard all this data, the $256,000 loss, the deadly CLA isomer. What are the 3 not negotiable, actionable steps they need to take right now?
Let's break it down into immediate, medium, and long-term actions.
Takeaway 1, focus on the unopened box. This is for this week.
The insight is this. The PSPS is your highest pay-per-minute tool. It's the cheapest insurance you can buy against component loss. You cannot afford to assume your paper ration is what your cows are actually eating.
And the action.
Find that separator this week. Run 1 sample of your fresh TMR in one of your refusals from the next morning. If the refusals have way more long stuff, you are sorting. Adjust your mix immediately. Add moisture. Check your chop length. Do it for the weekend.
Takeaway 2, establish the 21-day rule. This is your medium-term strategy.
The insight here is that rumen recovery takes patience. You are changing a microbial ecosystem, and that takes a full cycle. Don't quit after 5 days.
And the action.
If you find and fix a structural problem, commit to that change for a full 21 days before you judge it. Track your DMI, rumination, and locomotion scores daily, and know that the big butterfat lift won't show up until week 2. Manage your expectations based on the biology.
And finally, takeaway 3, 0 tolerance for starch and structure failure. This is your long-term positioning.
The insight is that fecal starch above 3% is expensive feed being flushed away, costing you almost a pound of milk per day for every point over that line, and it is almost always a physical structure problem.
So the action is to create a closed loop.
Exactly. Integrate your PSPS results with regular fecal starch testing. Use that shaker box data to enforce a culture of consistency with your feeding team. Make physical quality control a primary KPI that protects your entire margin from metabolic chaos.
This has been another deep dive from the Bullvine podcast. For more straight talking, no BS industry analysis, head to www.thebullvine.com.
Subscribe wherever you get podcasts. We're out with new episodes every day, and next time's topic will be analyzing the true cost of forage inventory shrinkage and spoilage and how much money you're leaving in the silage pit.